I imagine that right now you're feeling a bit like Alice, tumbling down the rabbit hole. Let me tell you why you're here. You're here because you know something. What you know you can't explain, but you feel it. You felt it your entire life. That there's something wrong with the world. You don't know what it is, but it's there, like a splinter in your mind, driving you mad. It is this feeling that has brought you to me. This is your last chance. After this, there is no turning back. You take the blue pill, the story ends. You wake up in your bed and believe whatever you want to. You take the red pill, you stay in Wonderland, and I show you how deep the rabbit hole goes. All I'm offering is the truth, nothing more.
For we are opposed around the world by a monolithic and ruthless conspiracy that relies primarily on covert means for expanding its sphere of influence, on infiltration instead of invasion, on subversion instead of elections, on intimidation instead of free choice, on guerrillas by night instead of armies by day. It is a system which has conscripted vast human and material resources into the building of a tightly knit, highly efficient machine that combines military, diplomatic, intelligence, economic, scientific, and political operations. Its preparations are concealed, not published. Its mistakes are buried, not headlined. Its dissenters are silenced, not praised. No expenditure is questioned, no rumor is printed, no secret is revealed. But I am asking your help in the tremendous task of informing and alerting the American people.
And now, welcome to another episode of Down the Rabbit Hole. Here's your host from federaljack.com. It's Popeye.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to tonight's live edition. Tonight, I want to introduce you to an independent filmmaker, independent investigator like myself, someone who I met down in Dallas, or I should say up in Dallas compared to where we're both from, good old South Florida. I want to give my guest, before he comes on, a big shout out because I want to let him talk. So I want to give him a shout out for carrying Judyth's books, by the way, that you hear me sell. Me and Lee, the autograph copies. I didn't have enough room in my vehicle to bring them all back from Dallas, and Pierre himself brought back a bunch of them for me. So I'm going to give him a big shout out now before I forget. Anyway, I want to introduce my guest tonight. I want to introduce him to all of you. I want to pick his brain about what he witnessed, what he experienced at the 50th. Because not only was I with him, but I was also away from him for... everybody was out. We were together, but we were all also doing our own things. So Pierre had some interesting experiences, and I want to get his take on the whole 50th. Plus, JFK isn't his only cup of tea. He's actually very well aware as to everything that's going on. He's just an all-around smart guy. And I knew that after I met him, I had to get him on the broadcast. And I got a couple other people that I met while I was out in Dallas and New Orleans that I'm going to be bringing on the broadcast in the next coming weeks as well. But tonight, let me bring up my guest, my new friend, and I have to tell you, ladies and gentlemen, he's a hell of a documentary filmmaker. This guy does not miss anything. He doesn't mess around with his equipment. I thought I had some decent, I'm doing air quotes, decent equipment, and his stuff made my stuff look like garbage, so he doesn't mess around. I promise you, when his film about Judyth, he's making a film about me and Lee, about the book, about Judyth, about her whole story with Oswald and the Kennedy assassination. When it comes out, you're going to have to check it out. But I'll let him get into that. Anyway, without any more time wasting, let's bring my guest up, Pierre Rivard. Pierre, welcome to the broadcast, brother.
Hey, Popeye, how are you? It's good to talk to you again.
How are you, dude? First of all, I said this when I was introing you, but I got to give you a big shout out again. Thank you so much for the help with bringing the books back from Dallas for me. Otherwise, the listeners wouldn't have any more left because the first box that I brought back is already gone. So now I'm into the boxes that you actually lugged back for me. So thank you from me and from everybody that's able to purchase one. Otherwise, they wouldn't be able to do it. So you're just as an integral part of getting that stuff out there as Judyth or I am. So big thanks for that.
Hey, it's one of the most important books, that's ever been written, and it is heavy, meaning it's so well documented The pictures are great, and it's just an amazing book, really one of the most important one ever. It's very historical, and I think everyone should read it.
It is really a good book, and it's one of those books that even if you're skeptical, like, again, it's always good to keep an open, skeptical mind and not believe everything and research it. I don't want anybody to just read the book and be like, oh, okay, everything she says is 100% true, and I can just take it at face value. No, research it. She gives you the information to go do the research yourself, and you'll see. Pierre got the experience, the same experience I did. We went on 2 separate days, but we both got a chance to go to those public health buildings that she mentions in her book, and that Ed Haslam mentions in Dr. Mary's Monkey, which is where the particle accelerator was, where Ed and other researchers believe that Mary Sherman was killed. You got a chance to see some of the buildings. I got a chance to see some of the buildings. It's different when you actually get a chance to get on the ground. And then we talked the one guard that when you went with Chaplain McHenry, I went with him as well, and we talked to a guard, and one of the guards we spoke to that was on the grounds there of those buildings, he had been there, I don't know, working at the place for 30-something, 40-something years, so he was engrossed in the history. That was like his thing. He liked the history of stuff. So this guy knew the history of everything. So he sat, while we were walking around, he would sit with either me or Chaplain McHenry, and he would tell us all the history about the buildings, and it confirmed a lot of the stuff that we already knew. You know what I mean? It's almost like her story brings the glue that brings a lot of the missing pieces of the JFK puzzle together. The shadier parts, maybe things people don't understand, characters like David Ferry and the like. So before we get into the JFK assassination and Judyth and all that, let's take a few minutes. I want to introduce you to the listener. I'm going to shut up. I'm going to give you the floor. I want you to tell the listeners a little bit about yourself. What got you into documentary filmmaking, and then at what point in your life did you wake up and realize what was going on, and what got you into the JFK assassination?
Okay, well, I was born and raised in Montreal, Canada, and my mother really is the one I would credit with. She would always push books on me, magazines, and I was reading before kindergarten, and a lot of the stuff that I was reading, and that was back in the late 70s, was about Roswell, was capturing my imagination, Sasquatch, Bigfoot, that sort of thing. Things about ghosts, Area 51. So I grew up reading about all of that stuff, which I thought was just absolutely fantastic, very interesting stuff, and it helped me become actually a critical thinker, because a little bit like Mulder in the X-Files, I want to believe, that poster that he had up on the wall. But then I realized that it's important to be a skeptic when you're looking at some of that stuff, because there's a lot of fakes out there. There's a lot of, for some weird psychological reason, people put out some stuff out there that's not real, made up stories, made up pictures, that kind of thing. But as I grew up, I became more and more of a skeptic. I started to ask more and more questions. And I ended up visiting. I went to Area 51. I did not go inside the base, but I got to drive around the base. I got to go to Roswell, New Mexico. So I got to live a lot of the wonderful things that I read about as a child. And I moved actually from California to Florida about 5 years ago. And as I drove, it's when I did a lot of these visits, I had to go to Dallas. That was one of my stops, because like most Americans and Canadians and people from around the world, you hear about Dealey Plaza. You know that, something really big happened there on November 22nd, 1963, and I had to see it for myself. So I stopped in Dealey Plaza. I parked the car, and I paid a guy $5 to give me a little tour, because there's these guys hanging around, and they show you the different, the grassy knoll, and they talk to you about what may have happened in 1963. And I left Dealey Plaza more convinced than ever to really research this. I had looked a little bit into the JFK assassination before then. It was an area of interest, but that's really what triggered my serious research. And I started reading. I read a lot of books on the JFK assassination. You know, there's the classics like Jim Marrs, Crossfire. And from there, I just went on and read. And eventually, I fell into this book called Me and Lee, which I thought was very intriguing, and it had to do with Lee Harvey Oswald's girlfriend, you know, someone that he dated back in the summer of '63 when he was, I'll use the word stationed in New Orleans, because I do believe that he was on a mission and he was working in New Orleans that summer. He was there for a purpose. And that was always my greatest area of interest, was Lee Harvey Oswald's life. Who this guy was. I think he's one of the most enigmatic character, you know, in history, and I really wanted to find out all I could about this guy. And as you know, I mean, he's a fascinating guy. You know, he joined the Civil Air Patrol when he was 15 years old. That's where he met David Ferrie, which, by the way, Judyth is writing a book which should come out in the next month or two, I believe. It'll be available on Amazon. I can't wait to read that book. He joined the Marines when he was 17 years old. You know, he ran some special missions out there in Japan. He was a radar man. He worked on the secret U-2 program. Was in the Marines for a couple of years. And at that time, when the CIA, and we know that for a fact, had a false defector program to the Soviet Union, well, Lee Oswald happened to defect to the Soviet Union, and that's like at the height of the Cold War. Went to the Soviet Union, lived there for a couple of years, and then came back and really had no problem at all, you know, and he wasn't tried or sentenced for treason or anything like that, even though he went out there, a military man who had served his country and had a lot of secrets. You know, so to me, I'm convinced that Lee Harvey Oswald was a CIA operative, maybe a low-level operative, you know, and he was probably on loan to the FBI as well, so he worked both sides here in this country. And, you know, I think he was a part of the conspiracy, but I do believe Judyth, when she says that Lee loved JFK and did not want to kill JFK and did not want him to die, that I'm totally convinced about. And so I think he definitely, he got a raw deal. And, you know, just like New Orleans, you were talking about the U.S. Public Health Hospital, it's such a part of the dark side of the secret, you know, history of the United States that so few people know about. And that's one of the goals of my documentary, is to really educate people, to show them a side of the JFK assassination that they haven't seen in any other work before them. And I've seen a lot of work, like the Man Who Killed JFK was very well done. But I really want my documentary to be a part of passing the torch to a younger generation. You know, because what I've witnessed, what I noticed in Dallas, you know, a lot of the people that I've interviewed, they're all in their 70s, you know, because this happened 50 years ago. And I think it's very important that we pass the torch to a younger generation, that they pick up the torch and further the investigation, further the pressure that we need to keep putting on the government to release files and to finally know the truth that a coup d'etat took place on November 22nd, 1963.
Yeah, and I agree about the age difference. When I was in Dallas, everybody, the witnesses, anybody that really gave a crap about it and there were younger kids there. There was a younger crowd, but it's still predominantly this older generation of Americans, people even older than me. Like, I thought it was odd. I'm in my late 30s, Pierre, and I had people calling me kid. And they were like, "Oh, you're so smart for such a young gentleman." And I'm like, "Young gentleman? I'm getting close to 40. I'm not young. I'm not a spring chicken anymore." But I had to step back and realize that like the people I was talking to were 75, 80 years old. And a lot of them, by the way, I have to give credit. You know, everybody's afraid of getting old. All the people I met, they got around better than half the people that I know that are in their 30s and their 20s. So I don't know what anybody's concerned about. At least that older generation, they ate red meat. You know, they ate real fat foods and drank alcohol and smoked cigarettes, and they lived to be like 120 years old. The younger generations, we eat all the food with all the crap inside of it, and everybody's dying at 40. Anyway, I don't want to digress too much. So yeah, there was that older generation that was there, but my spirit was lifted, I guess you could say, because I noticed at a couple events like ours, there was that young couple that was they were a documentary film crew of their own. They were working, you know, not with you, but like on their own boyfriend girlfriend team, and they couldn't have been more than 21, 22 years old. I mean, they were babies. They still had water behind the ears and everything, and you know. These kids knew their stuff. I sat and talked to them, and they knew their stuff. Like they knew. I mean, they had read Judyth's book. They really knew. So that gave me a little bit of hope. You know what I mean? So did you see that too when you were in Dallas?
Yes, on November 22nd, 2013. I went down to Dealey Plaza, and they had a ceremony, and of course the people were kept out of the actual area, you know, Dealey Plaza. So I was on the outside with everybody, and there were a lot of teenagers there, and I was very surprised. And then later I learned that it was this popular talk show host, Alex Jones, I believe, had invited people, you know, to show up. And so I did interview a few teenagers. Unfortunately, some of the teenagers I interviewed, they had no idea who Lee Oswald was, but they were there. You know, they were interested in you know, being a part of the moment and participating in what was going on. So, you know, I think there's a will with that youth to be part of something that's big, and I think that there's this innate you know, wanting the truth. You know, I think everybody wants justice deep down inside. Who doesn't want justice, and who doesn't want the truth? So I think that we just need to present that truth in a way that's going to be very appealing to these people, because, I mean, I wasn't kidding when I said that Judyth's book is one of the most important books out there, but it's also, I mean, it's a beautiful love story. It's a story that, you know, it's like between this beautiful, intelligent woman and a spy, you know, this exciting guy who's living this double life, and it's like, who wouldn't want to, you know, understand that story and be a part of it, you know, read it or see it in a film. It's a very fascinating story that just happens to be true, yet most people are being kept from it. Most people, I mean, Lee has been portrayed as a lone nut. You know, he's just some crazy guy who killed the president all on his own, and it's just such BS, you know. So I think that the truth needs to come out, and it will prevail. You know, I think, I don't know if it's going to be another 50 years or 100 years, but it will prevail. I think that what happened in 1963, definitely it'll be clear one day that it was a coup d'etat, and that factions of the government and the CIA really got rid of the president because they wanted to get a hold of the power. You know, and that's the one thing that Henry Kissinger said that I agreed with him. He said that the greatest aphrodisiac is power. You know, and I think that's a powerful statement in itself. It's also true, and so I think that's the root of all evil, and that's what happened in 1863. It was all about, you know, getting a hold of that power, and Lyndon B. Johnson won on that day. You know,
and not only did Johnson win, but it goes deeper than him. A lot of people, their research into the Kennedy assassination, it stops with him. You know, they want to blame him, and it just goes much further. And I was actually delighted when I sat down with you and I got a chance to pick your brain in Dallas. and you were just so on point and articulate with everything. Like you're not blinded by anything. You totally see what's going on, Pierre, and that's important. And that's why I was glad that you were putting this whole documentary together, because I like where you're aiming with this. See, you see what I see. You see that the youth of today is not lost. You know, we often lament about how the youth of today is retarded down, and all this crap they see on TV, MTV, and all this useless pop culture garbage, right? But I don't think we give them enough credit sometimes. The youth of today isn't as dumb as we think. They just need the proper guidance and the proper direction. They're a lot smarter at their ages than we were, or savvy. Yes, they've been dumbed down. There is certain knowledge they may not have, but if fixed and if properly addressed, it's not too late. And when I see the younger generations being given the proper direction, whatever it be, often they take the ball and run with it. Yes, you do have there is a lot of the side effect from all the brainwashing they've done, and we'll end up dealing with that for generations. But I don't think all is lost. And things like your documentary are a good tool to take and say, look, here, look at this, watch this. And like you said, the younger, I noticed the women really love Judyth's book, and it doesn't really matter what age, Pierre. I noticed that if it's a female and she reads, she's into reading, no matter what age, they like Judyth's book because they can at least connect with the love story. They understand her as a female, you know what I mean? It's just the way she comes across with the book. And look, I wouldn't talk to Pierre about this. Pierre wouldn't talk about this, all these other people that have investigated wouldn't have talked about it the way they have unless it was real. I mean, this story is real. Look, Pierre and myself have both walked the very grounds where some of these things took place. I saw it with my own eyes. And by the way, tell me, aren't those buildings creepy, dude?
Oh, they're extremely creepy, and I was there at night. Were you there at night as well, or?
We were there in like the middle of the afternoon into the early evening, just as the sun was setting, and we were like, I have pictures where the sun's just starting to go down, and it's getting close to the horizon, and it was, dude, it just felt really creepy. Like I was waiting for somebody in a lab coat to just jump out of somewhere and drag us into one of the corners. We actually went up into the buildings and walked around inside the buildings, and it was just very, very, very creepy feelings inside those buildings, man. Like, you know what I mean? Like, you could, if you research the paranormal, then you understand what I mean. Like, you could just, it's one of those buildings that when you even pulling up to it, I was like, I looked at Chaplain McHenry, and he looked at me, and I was like, I think that's the building. And he's like, yeah, me too. You could just feel it, like, emanating from it. Ugh.
Yeah, they're a very historic building, and a lot of things happened there that'll probably remain secret, forever, because they were testing for a lot of strange things took place back then. Trying to create a biological weapon. I mean, it's something that happened there. And yeah, I saw Mary Sherman's apartment as well, and I had goosebumps, doing this tour there. And there's a footage that I have of a guard at the U.S. Public Hospital building, and he's walking around the building at night with a flashlight, and he's wearing a mask, because he doesn't want to breathe in whatever's in the air over there. So it just adds even more creepiness to the whole thing, knowing that they did all these experiments out there. This guy's wearing a mask not to, take in anything. It was fascinating to walk those grounds. And I think that story needs to be told in a way that, people are going to really connect with it, and in a massive way. I mean, not enough people know about what went on there, and I'm just surprised those buildings are still standing, because they could have destroyed a lot of the evidence, but they're still standing. But aren't there plans to actually put some of those buildings down? Have you heard anything about that?
Yeah, when we were there, they were telling us that the private hospital purchased it, and I guess they're going to renovate some of the buildings, knock maybe some of the older ones down. They're actually going to use it. I guess they're going to eventually, reuse it for hospital space. I don't know, that whole area is creepy. It was a mental asylum, it was a public health facility, and then it was a mental asylum, and they did, plus whatever they were doing with the experiments with, Mary Sherman and the CIA and Oxner and all them that they were doing behind the scenes. That whole area is creepy. And the other place that's creepy is David Ferry's mouse house. Not his apartment. His apartment's creepy in and of itself, but the mouse house is creepy too, where they did all the mouse experiments. Pierre, I'm going to pause us right there. Ladies and gentlemen, do not go anywhere. Break sneaking up. Stay tuned. We'll be back in 3 short minutes. Don't go anywhere. We are back, ladies and gentlemen. We'll get right back into it with Pierre. And again, he has a unique perspective because there's only a few of us that have been able to run around this public health facility. And to understand, it's a huge campus. It's enormous. I don't even remember the exact size of it, but it's big enough that you need a car to drive across. It's huge. It's probably, I would say, the size of, I wouldn't say a college campus, maybe like half the size of a community college campus, I guess. Maybe a little bit bigger than half size. I'll ask Pierre what he thinks. But it's a really large facility, and to understand that, picture if you've ever seen a mental asylum, how big, a mental asylum, if you grew up or you live near one, the grounds, they're usually huge. Well, like that, pretty sprawling area, covers a lot of acreage, decent amount of buildings on it. And where the building, in fact, Pierre, the building that I was telling you about, that the chaplain and I think that's the one where we found the exact room where the particle accelerator was. There's a huge power line that's still there to this day, and it's huge. I mean, I'm talking, this thing's got to be, I don't know, 6 inches in diameter, 8 inches in diameter. It's huge, and it's running along. In where those buildings were. There's a little stone wall in the back. It's running along that little stone wall in the back, and there was leaves piled up on it. But I walked over and I kicked all the leaves off of it, and I was like, "Wow, what are you powering with that? That's a big ass power line. What were they running power for?" And the guy's like, "Oh, they have all sorts of equipment and stuff that they use in here, and it's been like that for a very long time." And Chaplain McHenry and I are just looking at each other because we didn't want to tell them. We told them that we were there making a documentary about historic buildings in the historic medical community in New Orleans, or else they would, because they were. He said when you guys went on, their attitude was much different than when we first showed up. They were really combative with us. So he told them that we were a documentary film crew. We were just filming, old New Orleans and all these old historical medical buildings, and then they were all too happy to give us the grand tour, and they gave us a guard to walk around, and he was this old guy that just happened to be so filled with information. It was great. And the chaplain and I just sat there, and you know how Chaplain McHenry is. That guy he's great at politicking, and he could talk to a rock and make friends with it. So he was pulling information out of this guy. And then we found a room with all these blueprints in it. We started taking pictures. I have photos of all this stuff. I just have to go through it. I've been so slammed since I got back with, getting surgery and then recovering from it, that I haven't had a chance to even go through a quarter of the video footage or pictures that I took. And Judyth informed me the other day that last week that what's his name? I can't remember his name now. I want to say his name's Jim. The attorney, Billy Celeste's attorney, passed away right after Jim Norville. Yeah. Right after he spoke to us, literally, like, he went home, and within a few days he was dead. So, I mean, God rest his soul, whatever, rip Jim Norville, better or worse, I don't know. I don't know the guy too well, but at least he had the courage to speak out and tell the truth. And no, I don't think it was a conspiracy either, just in case anybody's wondering, because I know that's going to get thrown out there. Well, do you think it was done because, somebody offed him? No, he was very, very sick. Pierre can attest to it. He saw him in person, so, he wasn't doing too well. But the 50th, I want to ask your opinion about something else. I want to shift gears onto something else before I forget to mention this, and that's Lee's memorial service. And I just thought the memorial service was fitting in a lot of ways. One, the fact that we had more people at his memorial service for the 50th than they did when they buried him. And there was just a lot of weird little serendipitous things going on. Like Wayne Madsen, the investigative journalist, he showed up at the funeral with a friend of his, and they didn't even realize that we were there for like a little funeral type, remembrance ceremony for Lee. He didn't even realize that any of us were going to go there. They just happened to be out and about. Because I asked him, I said, "Oh, you guys knew?" He said, "No, we were just out and about. We were going to go do something else." And we said, "Hey, let's go over and see Oswald's grave," because they knew it happened to be in the area. So they went over to the cemetery, and then we all pulled in, and literally they pulled up as we were all pulling in and setting up and getting ready to start the memorial service. So it was just little things like that, I don't know, it's like the universe's way, I guess, of showing me that, we're on the right track. At least that's what I say. What do you think?
I thought it was great, and what I loved about it is they kept the flowers there for a couple of days at least after the that funeral, and Judyth was very afraid that they were going to take the flowers away that same night, because his grave was just covered with flowers. It was very beautiful. It was very respectful, and the chaplain again spoke and led us in prayers, and it was, when you know the true Lee, it just really made sense, and it was well deserved that we stood and honored him in that way. And I do know that you had your moment with him and you saluted him, and that was great. And I made sure that Judyth did have her moment. It was actually the next day, that day that we were all together. This meant so much to her. But Judyth was so busy and so overwhelmed with being in charge of everything the whole weekend that she didn't have that one moment with him. So she went back the next day and filmed we started to Rivard. She kneeled down, she had her alone, that very well, that's called documentary. I tell it's going to be amazing that you've never heard the same thing. And to be part of it is that this was a love story, that between these two individuals. That's just a beautiful, beautiful thing that again most people are not even aware of.
I'm actually surprised that when people, I actually thought that there were less people, but I was surprised by the amount of people that knew and just realized from the amount of evidence that there was no way that Oswald was this, crazy lone gunman that the media and the government tried to portray him as, and that there's more to the story. I mean, there were people, when I was down at Dealey Plaza, I heard some of the idiots down there, you hear the chit-chat. I was just walking around by myself with my camera getting video and still shots, so I really didn't care about getting any audio. But I was listening as I was walking around, and you could hear the people. You could hear them, a lot. Most of the people down there were open-minded, outside-the-box thinkers, I'll call them. I don't like the term conspiracy theorists. But conspiracy-minded, we'll say. Whereas there was maybe there was a definite smaller contingent of people that were there that didn't believe it. But there was a mix. I mean, there were people down there that bought the government's official version. They were just down there because it was the 50th.
Right. There's a few moments that are very telling about, pointing out that Judyth really did tell the truth. There's something that people don't really know about, but they could look into it, they could research it, and it's doable to get the answer, is that on the day of the, what we call the big event back then, Lee took off his wedding ring and he put it on the dresser, because he had slept at his wife. He was still married at the time. He had a couple of kids, and he took off his wedding ring. And when he was arrested, and you can see pictures of it, he's wearing a ring, but it's not his wedding ring. It's his Marine's ring that he had. And to me, that's very telling that he's wearing the Marine's ring, and that he took off the wedding ring because the plan was that following the big event, which hopefully Lee was going to be able to, warn the president perhaps by shooting wide, or who knows what actually happened. I wasn't there, but I'm pretty certain that it's not alone not to kill the president on his own. But the big plan was that Lee and Judyth were going to get together, in Mexico and just live off the rest of their life away. So the fact that he took off his wedding ring that morning, I think is very telling. And then the other thing is something that Judyth mentions in The Man Who Killed Kennedy. She was interviewed for that documentary, and she talks about her last conversation with Lee on the phone, and she quotes Lee as, using the words, the big event, which was the code name for November 22nd, 1963. And if you fast forward a few years later, on his deathbed confession, E. Howard Hunt says that the code name for the operation was the big event. Now, he said that on his deathbed, I think about 5 years after Judyth first mentioned it, on camera. So, again, I mean, there's all these little things that really highlight to the fact that Judyth is telling the truth. Everything falls in together.
Yeah, then that morning, I told you when we had breakfast what I saw that morning in regards to the big event, right? On the local TV. They went back, it was that commercial, and it went back to the live coverage, or the live local news coverage of them setting up for the 50th. And it comes back in with dramatic music, and the lettering comes flying in from the center of the screen and gets big, and it said, "The Big Event." Yeah, I nearly spit my coffee out across the hotel room that I was in. I was like, "What?" And everybody I say that to that has any inclination about anything with the JFK assassination like this, they all say the same thing. They're like, "Oh, that's right in your face."
Oh, it's an insult, Definitely, I wish I had that footage. But, furthermore, they repaved the road, because there's always X's, there's this one guy that puts these X's where the president was first shot and then when he had the fatal headshot, and they're on the road right there. But they repaved the road only to cover the X's, and then the rest of the road was not repaved, and it's just so extremely obvious. And they did that only a couple of days before, their so-called big event 50 years later. And it's just an insult, how they're treating, what happened back then. They're turning it into a joke and humanizing and just making fun of the researchers who really are doing something that's valuable, and uncovering this hidden history,
Well, they really can't stop it. They do what they want, but I mean, they didn't want people down there to begin with. And when I went down there, Robert Groden was down there selling his book. Like, he didn't care. He's like, you can tell me what I'm going to do, whatever. I'm going to go sell my book. Have a nice day. And there were other people doing the same thing. And you know what? That's what you need. You need people to be like, well, you can tell me that I can't go and honor the 35th President of the United States by telling people the truth about his assassination, but I have that right to do so, and I will practice that right. Thank you very much. Just because you say I can't do it, just because you have a costume or you hold some position of authority, or the only reason why they did that, a lot of people were like, "Oh, they're trying to cover it up." Yes, they were, but a lot of it was there was going to be a lot of international press there, and you get these politicians that even if they're not part of the old school cover-up, how they get connected to it is they don't want to sully their city's image with these idiot conspiracy theorists, these foolish people. We're going to have international press here. We can't have these idiots anywhere close to Dealey Plaza. I mean, that's the way they think. And all they did was show their hand. It wasn't effective. I didn't see it being effective in any way, shape, or form. They could have had the cops down there blocking people, beating the crap out of people, which for a brief second they did. But honestly, it really was for nothing. All it did was it really hardened the case that there's more than what the government says happened. They just hardened that case. They made it, just by acting like that. Had they let everybody just come down and just do their thing and respectfully, maybe, the city does their thing here, let people organize and do something over here on the side, whatever, but everybody be respectful. As long as if they had worked with maybe people to organize something, there wouldn't have been such a big hullabaloo. There wouldn't have been. Okay? Or, Jones and his crew never would have shown up. I mean, he even said it on his radio show that he never would have gone down there had they not done that. So their own actions prove that there is something that they want to hide. Well, even if they realize it or not, it just goes to show it. It sticks out like a sore thumb. And I was pleased to see that there was a lot more people, in fact, than I thought, that are at least questioning and skeptical. And I always tell everybody, there's more people out there than you realize, but there really was a lot more people there than even I realized. You know what I mean? When I rolled up, I was even impressed. So that kind of filled me with a little bit of hope. You've been to Dealey Plaza before. How many times? Just once?
A total of 2 times now, yeah.
When you first went there, and I got to ask you if you had the same experience that I did. When you first went there, when you had seen the Zapruder film and everything else, did you think that Dealey Plaza was flat?
Yeah, you're right. Even the second time around, I felt like I didn't remember it exactly that way, because the videos that we see make such a strong impression on us, and we grow up watching this footage. And, we have this image deep into our mind, and then we show up there, and it looks a little different, and it's like that, with TV shows, you see a studio that you've seen before on television, and it's a lot smaller than what you expected. Well, Dealey Plaza does look quite different, there is like a slope, and, the location of the Texas, it's not known as the Texas book, depository anymore, but the way it's located, according to where that street is kind of sloping down, and when you're walking it, and the grassy knoll area and all of that, it's a different perspective than what you'd see on television. So definitely, I had that impression as well.
Yeah, when I rolled up, and it's even if you you hear, it's on a slant, you don't realize how much of a slant it's on until you get there. Like the images of the grassy knoll itself. If you look at some of the shots, even the original, some of the stuff that came out from that day that's been released, right? The old grainy footage. It looks, from that all the way to Oliver Stone's movie footage, it looks the knoll looks, like you can see it goes up, but it looks like this slow, gradual slope, and it's not. The grassy knoll is actually very steep, and it's actually a lot higher than one would think. It's really weird when you get the chance to actually see it. It's much more actually compact, I think is the best way to put it. Like, it's almost like the camera has this effect of flattening it out and spraying it out further. So it gives it a little bit of a distorted proportion. But if you actually stand in Dealey Plaza, it's more compact. I think that's the best way to describe it. Yeah,
it's definitely something that I would encourage Americans to go and visit, because it's such an important part of our history. And from what we hear, the polls, most Americans do think that there was something more than what the official story states, the Warren Commission and what have you. So if people have that gut feeling that there was something more that took place, then really they shouldn't just let it go. They really should look deeply into it, because the ramification of what happened 50 years ago are still affecting us today. And that truth really needs to come out fully. And it's almost there. There was that different investigations in the 70s that actually did state that Lee Harvey Oswald most likely was aided. He was a part of a conspiracy to kill JFK. And again, most Americans don't really know about that. They just know about that popular Warren Commission findings. But yeah, it's a great place to visit. It's historical in nature, and they're trying to keep it that way. It's a historical section of the city. Apparently, the street level raised a couple of inches because of all the paving that they do. That's hardly noticeable, I would think, but that oak tree is still there, big old oak tree, and they're keeping it cut in a way that is similar to what it was back in '63. And of course, you noticed as well as I did that it was full of leaves, in November. And I know there's, it's been published before that Lee had an easy shot because in November that tree had lost all of its leaves. But it doesn't. It's full of leaves and it's all bushy and everything, and so he would not have had an easy shot, from up there, especially with that crazy little crackerjack gun that they claim he shot with, and you held it. You had a chance to actually work it a little bit. I have you on tape doing that. So what did you think of that Italian rifle?
Oh, you have me on film telling you. I think I even looked at the camera and said, Jesse Ventura was right, this thing is a piece of crap. Except I didn't use the word crap, actually. I think I swore. Pierre probably have to bleep that one out. But it is, because you couldn't... We tried twice, remember? I had it nice and snug in my shoulder, and I zeroed in on... I was looking out a window, and I zeroed in on, I set it up in my mind, knowing Dealey Plaza and actually having been down there, a good idea of something to look at, distance-wise, where Kennedy would have been from supposedly Oswald. And I already had a round in the chamber, because the first shot he wouldn't have had to, if he had to load it and then, before aiming or after aiming, then obviously he really couldn't have pulled it off, right? So obviously he had a round in the chamber. So I fired the first shot, and I went to recycle the bolt, and dude, the whole thing comes right up out of the small of your shoulder. Now, if you don't know anything about shooting, it's bad enough that it moves it and you'd have to come back up on target, but this thing literally pops the whole rifle right up out of your shoulder, and you're still trying to work the bolt. It hasn't even gotten the bolt all the way up to eject the shell yet. It's just a piece of crap rifle. They called it the humanitarian rifle for a reason, because it was just a piece of garbage. And I'm glad you brought up the picture about the tree, because I know that's what you were referencing. I took a picture of the spot where Kennedy's got the headshot, because what they, like Pierre said, they got rid of the X's for the 50th. So I stood out where the X was, the second one was, in the middle of the street when there wasn't any traffic for a second, and I got a shot looking back up at the window, supposedly where Oswald shot from, and you can clearly see that the tree was in the way. And I put up that little quote from Stone's JFK flick, where he said, the character of Lou Ivan is pointing out to Kevin Costner's character of Garrison, and he said, well, didn't Hoover say something about the that tree and in November and all? And he said, yeah. He said, Chief, I'm trying to I have to paraphrase here, but he says, Chief, it's a Texas live oak, doesn't shed its leaves till the first week of March. So I looked it up. He's correct. That's not a movie line. That's actually the truth. And I'm glad you brought up the fact, because you can attest to this too. They've been trimming that tree and keeping it pretty much in the same shape that it was 50 years ago. When I said that, when I posted that picture, remember people were arguing me, there's no way that they could keep that tree anywhere near what it was 50 years ago. Look, I don't know how they're doing it, but they're doing it, okay? And it's whether they as the limb grows, they keep trimming it down, or however they prune it, they have a professional guy come in because it's some sort of special tree. I don't know. All I know is that they're actually doing it. And, Pierre, you heard him say it 5-6 minutes ago. Yes, they are doing that. That's why I'm glad you brought that up, because that was a big bone of contention. Sure. Remember, I was arguing that point for a few days there.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah, so, Dealey Plaza is definitely different in real life than what you'd see in pictures. And it's definitely worth going. If you're going to be researching the JFK assassination, that's, you probably want to start there, and you'll end up in New Orleans sooner or later, because it really, a lot of things were going on that summer in New Orleans, and it was an essential part of me filming everything that went on up there, all the historical sites, and like you said, Dr. Mary Sherman. We were fortunate, in a way, to see some of her death pictures. Not too many people saw that, and again, it's very clear that something went on with her at her moment of death, that it's very unlike any other human being's death, and it probably did involve that linear particle accelerator. So it's pretty gruesome. And
that wasn't
Judyth
death by burning, right? That wasn't death by just burning to death, right? Like you noticed she still had all of her hair.
Yeah, and don't you have any training in firework as well? Isn't that?
Yeah, I was a firefighter. That's why I Judyth and I brought this up. In fact, last week when she was on Thursday, when she was on, and I said, I've seen dead bodies before from fires, and they don't. If it's hot enough to burn away, like 3/4 of her arm to the point where it's gone. It's not even like, oh, there's a chunk of it. No, it was a little nub attached to her, and that was it. Whatever was left of it was literally gone. It just vaporized it. Okay, so it's hot enough to do that. You know how hot it has to get for them to cremate bone. Okay, it like 3,000 degrees they cook you in the oven at, right? But yet it's not hot enough to burn the hair off of her head, which is like a foot, not even a foot away from her little nubby shoulder where the arm had. It just doesn't make any sense. It defies physics. It defies a lot of things, unless of course she was electrocuted. Oh, then it makes perfect sense, because it would all be localized to that area, which was the arm, hence the reason why it was vaporized. Pierre, I'm going to pause us right there because the break is sneaking up. Ladies and gentlemen, do not go anywhere. Get me and Lee. You can get it over at Federal Jack, and get Dr. Mary's Monkey. Look for it on Amazon.com. We will be right back. Stay tuned. Ladies and gentlemen, we are back with hour number 2 here on tonight's live edition of Down the Rabbit Hole. I am your host, Popeye from FederalJack.com. It is February 11th, 2014. It's the Tuesday edition of DTRH. And tonight, I'm hanging out with my friend, documentary filmmaker Pierre Rivard. We've been talking about the JFK 50th and all of the, well, some, not all. There's just too many to list. We'd be here for 6 hours. Some of the interesting little stories and things that we experienced during the 50th, and just some of the stuff that, we see, plus information, just regular information that is out there, facts about the JFK assassination itself. We're going to finish up with JFK here in the first segment of the second hour, and get into other things with Pierre as well, though, because Pierre is not a one-trick pony. No. He knows all about 9/11, geoengineering, you name it. Like I said, he's an outside-the-box thinker. He's a very smart individual, and that's why I wanted to bring him on the broadcast to introduce him to you all. I look forward to his movie coming out, not because I'm in a few scenes, but I actually want to see the documentary because I've been talking to him off-air, and I get a chance to actually hear his ideas, and now I have this idea of what it's going to look like, and I'm super excited to see it. But I want to finish up with the JFK assassination. So let's focus on the one last, I guess, aspect of it, and that would be New Orleans, at least for tonight anyway, and that would be New Orleans. Now, Pierre said something last segment that really it hit it home. When you start to research the JFK assassination and you start to look at this angle of it, you realize that it does connect to New Orleans. Look at Garrison's investigation. When you go to New Orleans, when you actually go to New Orleans and you actually start to go to these places that were connected to the assassination, you can almost feel it. We went all over the place. Did you go to Oswald's house, or the place they called Oswald's house, where it wasn't actually in the front, but he actually stayed on the place that was around the side? He had that little side entrance. Did you get a chance to see that?
Yes, I did. I interviewed the lady that lives there right now, and that's probably going to make the cut. She had some interesting things to say. So yeah, I saw the house.
There's just a lot of weird there's stuff that's gone, by the way. I mean, like I was telling you off air, Guy Bannister's office, that whole block where, Office of Naval Intelligence, the CIA, all that scene that you see. If you go back and watch JFK, ladies and gentlemen, where Kevin Costner has his crew, they're walking, as he's Jim Garrison, and he's walking them around, and he says, "Don't you see anything odd? Oswald was here, and here's an Office of Naval Intelligence, the CIA, the FBI." He's like, "Really? This guy's a commie, and he's here? That makes no sense." Well, that whole block is gone. The spot where Guy Bannister's office was, gone. And it was knocked down, and they made it like a federal court complex. And if I remember correctly, it's the Hale Boggs building, or whatever, complex. And if you go up and look him up, he was the one individual on the Warren Commission that didn't agree with it and wouldn't sign off on it, and then he died in a plane crash.
Yeah, right.
Is that irony?
It's a very mythic story. It's a story that could be told thousands of years from now, because it has all these elements to it that, there's a lot of interesting irony. There's researchers that just focused on all these mysterious deaths, and there's over about 120 material witnesses that have died. Between 1963 and like 1977, or whichever year that they focused on, and a lot of these deaths are very mysterious. They're suicides that are just impossible. They're strange accidents, car accidents, plane crashes. All of these things. You have to be a moron if you think that this is just coincidences. If you look at it, and there's some numbers that have been advanced scientifically speaking that say that the chances that all of those people died, that were material witnesses, are like 1 in like a trillion billion or something like that. It doesn't happen, these kind of coincidences. And that's one of the strongest case to show that indeed there was a conspiracy, to kill Kennedy, that it wasn't just a lone nut to do it. There's so many different, types of evidence out there. And that's the sad thing that gets me, is you'll hear somebody get outspoken, because sometimes, I have these Facebook posts about me being innocent or things like that, and I'll have someone respond and say, "Oh, I doubt it." And so I would ask, "Well, what research have you done?" And they'll say, "Well, none." I say, "Well, okay, you seem to have a strong opinion that, this man is guilty, and they haven't done any research. They just base their opinions on, the media. And that's another interesting thing about the CIA, is they're so embedded into our lives that we don't even know. Now we're learning about all the different spying that they do, and everything that we're doing. Probably you and I have probably followed our accounts on Facebook and that sort of thing. But they had something years ago called Project Mockingbird. And Project Mockingbird, and the papers are out on that, it's official. It was a project where you had CIA operatives embedded into the media worldwide, in different countries as well as here for NBC, CBS, and what have you. So, I grew up in Canada hearing about the KGB, in the Soviet Union, and how they would control the news, how they would control the media. But you know what? All of that has been happening here for years and years and years. And so, the CIA has a strong hold on the media, on what is being said, the way we perceive other world leaders, the way we perceive other countries. France is being demonized all the time, in the news. And I know there's a lot of Americans that don't even understand why, but they have a bad opinion of France. But you know what? When the French people are upset about their government, they're going to hit the street. They're so close to having a revolution. Anytime that something's going on that they don't like, they hit the street. And they hit the streets on a Wednesday afternoon, and they stop traffic and they bring the city of Paris to a halt. But here in America, we have to get a permit to protest. And then you get your permit on a Sunday afternoon in an industrial part of town where you're not going to be bothering anybody. So, of course, they don't want the American people to see what the French are doing and to think, well, the French know what they're doing. So, they're being demonized all the time. And I think the CIA actually plays a part in forming our opinions about the world that we live in. And, of course, that includes the JFK assassination.
There's so much to the assassination itself. I could sit and do, I don't know, I've already done probably 40, 50 hours of shows on it, but I could easily just do a radio show called the JFK Assassination Show. Like I could, just like 9/11, I could do one called the 9/11 Show. Or there's so much information out there. It's just a matter of, I guess, leading the horse through the water so people can see it. And that's why I'm excited about your film. And before I forget, can we plug it at all tonight? Are we allowed to, or is it not in that stage of the?
Yeah. Well, what I want to do with it is to present it to the Cannes Film Festival. So I really want to go to some of the highest profile film festivals out there. And if it doesn't make the final cut for the Cannes Film Festival, then I'll offer it to Sundance, the Toronto Film Festival. So I want it to be at some high-profile film festival. And I think it has a good chance to be accepted because of the story itself. I mean, it's a very poignant story. Everybody knows JFK. Everybody knows. I mean, Lee Harvey Oswald is an iconic figure. So I think there's a good possibility that it'll make one of these higher-end film festivals. So we'll go from there. It's going to be 44 minutes long, and that's on purpose so that it can fit into a 1-hour TV time slot. And we'll see. I don't have any distribution deal or anything like that yet, but I'm not doing it for the money. I'm doing it because it's a passion for me, and I just want the truth to be out there, and like I said, to pass the torch to the younger generation. So we'll see what happens with that.
Maybe you can release a director's cut, like Stone did.
Yeah, I think there's going to be a lot of interesting footage. There's one interesting story about Dallas. I went to stake out the Texas Theater before I brought Judyth there because I wanted to film her comments at various sites in the Dallas area. And I got there very early Sunday morning, and that's the Texas Theater where Lee was apprehended shortly after the assassination of JFK. And, I'm filming the outside area of the Texas Theater. And I get close to the door, and they have a historic plate, that says that it's now recognized as a historic building and what have you. And I have this gut feeling, sometimes you just do. And I'm thinking, well, I know it was closed because it was very early Sunday morning, but I had a gut feeling to just pull the door open. And I pulled the door open, and sure enough, the door had been left unlocked. And I'm like, oh my God, Lee was accused of sneaking in the Texas theater back in '63. And here I am with my camera on. The door was left unlocked, so I'm sneaking in. And I'm going in, and I'm filming the lobby. And then I'm thinking, well, since I'm here, if I get arrested, if the cops are on their way, because I'm thinking maybe they have some silent alarm or something, at least I have footage that, I'm not somebody trying to rob the place or anything. They could look at the footage and let me go, hopefully. But I figure since I'm that close, I have to see the room and seat where Lee sat. Even though they took the original seat away, there's still that location where he sat. And so I did find the door, and I tell you, I was very nervous. I'm all by myself, and I'm in this place that was left unlocked, this historic place. And so I found the place, the movie, where they show the movie room, And I walk in with the camera, but it was too dark. It was completely pitch darkness, so I couldn't film anything in there. I couldn't see anything in there, so I walked back out. But that was one of the several interesting things that happened while filming in Dallas. So I'm not sure if that'll make the final cut, but yeah, I could definitely be part of the extras.
When we were at the Arlington conference, I kept looking around to try to figure out who in the room was the agent. I'm like, okay, which one of you is the spook in the room? Come on. Which one of you is it going to be? There's only one individual that two. There's one guy and there's one female. They weren't together. I don't even think they're at the same time. I don't even recall them seeing them at the same time. One was at the conference itself, and the other was at the hotel. At the breakfast meet and greet she had the one day where she did the slideshow and all that stuff. There was one. There was a female there that I was and there was a male at the Arlington conference that I was questioning. The only two. Now I can't say that they could just be regular people. It was just something about them made my bells go off. But that was it. But I wondered. I did wonder while we were there if we were being watched. I mean, obviously there were people in Dallas. And I'm sure that they were keeping an eye on her. They do normally, so I'm sure somebody was sitting somewhere watching us or aware of what we were doing in some way, shape, or form.
Well, we had an appointment to visit the Beckley house. I call it the Beckley house. That's the rooming house where Lee went back to. After the JFK assassination, he went back to his rooming house. And that's where he changed his clothes. And so we had an appointment to go there because apparently they preserved the bed, that he slept in and his little corner of the bedroom. And the morning of our appointment, we got a call from the owner of the house, who's the granddaughter of the original owner, who lived there when Lee was there. And she canceled the appointment. She said that, she couldn't make it. Things came up, and she knew that Judyth was going to be there, that I was going to be filming her. She had given me permission to do that because I had to ask, in order to put things on film, she would have had to sign a release paper and that sort of thing. So she changed her mind just a couple of hours prior to our visit, and Judyth, of course, was very disappointed, but she's used to it. We called her back. We made her a substantial offer, but she still refused.
I remember you and Judyth.
Seems like
I remember you guys having that conversation that morning at breakfast about it. And again, it was out of nowhere because you guys were all excited about it, and then boom, out of nowhere. And Judyth took it really in stride too. She was like, "Yeah, it's kind of normal, status quo." Kind of what I expected.
Yeah.
And you and I were like, more, like really, like we were obviously like somebody must have gotten to her, and that's how you and I were. And Judith's all calm about it. She's like, yeah, it happens all the time. I'm used to it. It was just wow. But yeah, it does happen all the time. I mean, look, you guys, look what happened with even that building, right? You and Chaplain McHenry were able to get on the property, no problem. Next time we went on, they gave us a problem, and we had to tell them that we were a documentary film crew. I mean, we were, but we just told them we didn't tell them we were filming about, weaponized cancer research on the property. They probably wouldn't have let us in. Somehow I don't think they would have been,
right.
I don't want my building in a documentary about that. And then the guard made sure to tell us, this is a special privilege that you're walking around with us. This never happens. And the chaplain and I looked at each other, and I'm like, yeah, except with him and Pierre the other day. Like, it does happen more than
yeah.
you know what I mean? Like, maybe you were off that day, dude.
Yeah. Well, that's part of the documentary filmmaking process, is sometimes you really have to be sneaky. You have to do everything you can to get that money shot. You know what you need. You just have to figure out a way to get it. And we stretch the truth a little bit, but that's what it's all about, is the truth, getting the truth out there. And those guards work with us, and I'll probably blur their faces. I don't want anybody to get fired. But yeah, I'm looking forward to that segment. Is going to be a very important segment of the documentary.
That whole area, that whole property was just creepy. I mean, like I said, when you go on there, I'm gonna go through the pictures and stuff. I'll get with you, off air. We'll meet up for lunch or breakfast, and I'll give you a thumb drive with all that stuff on it. I'll bring a hard drive and we could transfer, because there's probably about 40 or 50 gig worth of photos and videos just from that day alone. Because I had a couple of cameras going, my phone. I had a GoPro strapped to my forehead. Literally, I took a GoPro camera, strapped it to my head, and we were walking around. I was sticking my head in windows. I was sticking my cell phone in windows, trying to get pictures. It was crazy, man. And I got to say, Chaplain McHenry, all that Special Forces training came in handy, man. Because he was keeping the guards busy. Like, he's like, Papa, you got this? I'm like, yeah, you keep them busy. I'll do what I got to do. And he's doing his thing, and you see how he is. He's good at what he does. And he's sitting there keeping the guard busy, and I went over and I'm click, 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 sticking the camera in places. So hopefully we got some good footage.
Oh, yeah, he was great. He's very dramatic and a wonderful guy to work with. I'm looking forward to seeing him again.
Yeah, I'm actually going to bring him on the show. He does his own radio show, so he wants me to come on. I'm going to bring him on for the listeners so they can meet him. He's, ladies and gentlemen, when you meet him, Chaplain McHenry is just he's a really cool guy. High is one of the coolest people you'll ever meet. He's just like salt of the earth, very down to earth individual. And he loves giving the Dr. Mary's monkey tour too. When you go see him in New Orleans.
Yes, yeah. And he knew a lot of the players as well from back then. He was in New Orleans and in that area where Lee was at that time, but he doesn't remember ever seeing Lee. I mean, he might have run, across him at some point, but didn't know who he was. But he knew a lot of the players, including Ed. He was good friends with Ed, went to school with him, and didn't he meet? I think he might have met Dr. Alton Oxner at some point, and he met Jim Garrison, I think, briefly at some point. So, he's full of history. He's a wonderful guy.
And he knows New Orleans because, he grew up there. So he knows New Orleans like, if you need a tour, of New Orleans, he's your man. But then, you're researching this. It's like a double whammy. Not only does he know New Orleans and all the good places to eat and all the good places to drink and all that stuff and where not to go, but he also knows all this stuff about Dr. Mary's monkey and the JFK assassination, and he knows all about the whole agenda. Like, High is just as awake as anybody else is. He's very, very smart man. He's in fact, he did the eulogy at Lee's memorial service. Again, I think the video is online. If it's not, I have that stuff. See, I just gotta sit down. I have to have time to actually sit. You know how it is. You have to have time in your life to go back and, with that much video footage we pulled from that weekend, it's ridiculous. And, I'm sure there's going to be stuff that like maybe one of my shots got messed up and I might, have to cut something out here or there or whatever, but I could still keep the audio and just, how it is. It's a pain in the butt. So you got to go through and look at everything. But there was a lot of good information going around that weekend at all the conferences. I think the Arlington conference really, it panned out well. It was, honestly, there was a lot more people there than I even thought were going to show up. I thought we were going to have 3 people in the room. I thought it was going to be a room filled with empty folding chairs and like 3 or 4 of people in there, and we were going to be speaking to nobody. And the room was pretty decently packed. And there were people coming and going, and as it went on, it actually got even more packed. There were certain people that some of the people only wanted to hear one speaker or one individual speak, and that's perfectly A-okay. That's fine. The point is they got a chance to come out. They saw some people, I was there selling Judyth's book, for Chris Milligan. He had to take a break for about 20 minutes. He had to go take care of something. So he ran and go, because Judyth needed something picked up. There was something that we needed for the conference, whatever it was. So he ran to go take care of that, and I manned the table. And I was selling his book, her book, Vince Palomera's book. And, it was really a good reception. Just from my own experience, and I know, the experience you got, it was a good reception. For the 50th, for the amount of propaganda that was out there, that Oswald was a lone gunman, that he did it, and that's all there was. The amount of speakers and books and just truth that was out there for the 50th was phenomenal. It was able to push back this wall of propaganda. You know what I mean? Like, they had this huge tidal wave of BS. It kept pounding away. Oswald did it. Oswald did it. Oswald did it. And, you know, maybe 50 years ago, the public was more, you know, emotional because of the event. They didn't care. You know, they just lost their president. Now people are way more skeptical of the government, and they're like, "You're lying." You know what I mean? So it was good to see that there was this huge, what do you call it? Like a yearning, I would say, for knowledge. Like they yearned to know the truth. They wanted to know it. They needed to know the truth, and that's good. I mean, that gives me hope. There were, you know, because you still hear people say to me all the time, you know, I'm sure you've seen it in the YouTube comments or whatever, "Who cares about JFK, man? It was 50 years ago. What does it matter?"
Yeah.
I mean, come on, Pierre. What do you care? What do you say to people like that? I'll be. We have like about 2 minutes before we go to break. I'll let you answer this. I'll be a critic really quick. Hey, dude, what does the JFK assassination matter? It was 50 years ago. What does it matter, Pierre?
Oh, well, what does it matter? I mean, it was 50 years ago. It could have been yesterday. I mean, it's so important to expose what happened, because if you don't, then it'll happen again, and it has happened again. I mean, there's a book that was written. I forget the name of the lady, but it's called the Shock Doctrine. Right? There's some research that have been done that show that after an event, a very harsh emotional event like a JFK assassination or 9/11, that the population is really at its most vulnerable, and you can take advantage of them by just embedding a story in their mind, telling them, you know, this is what happened. This is the truth right here. Just look at what we're telling you. Listen to what we're telling you. And then you're shaping the people's opinion by doing that. But you're right. People are getting smarter and smarter because of social media. But there's still these dumb people going around always taking the side of the official story of what they're told. And you wonder if they're being paid for doing that, or if truly they're just so afraid deep down inside that they have to believe that the government is like their Santa Claus, their savior, and they just have to believe in this big daddy that's going to, you know, save them all. But, you know, the truth hurts, you know, but you have to find it. You have to seek it. And that's the only way we're going to be able to, you know, move forward in a healthy way. You have to expose the creep.
I agree. Pierre, I'm going to pause this right there because we got the break sneaking up on us. Ladies and gentlemen, do not go anywhere. Stay tuned. We got another segment coming up, another half hour with my guest, Pierre Rivard. Stay tuned. We are back, ladies and gentlemen. Final segment with my guest tonight, Pierre Rivard. We've been discussing the JFK assassination. Final segment, I want to shift gears, and I want to pick his brain as much as I can, because, as I said, I got a chance to talk with him for days while we were in Dallas and in Arlington. So I got a chance to pick his brain about all this stuff. But you guys haven't gotten a chance to hear what he has to think and he has to say about this stuff, and I want you to do that. So let's start with geoengineering. Now, geoengineering, you all know, is pretty much a huge science experiment in our little blue marble. I don't like to call it I know geoengineering is a neat little term for it, but I like to try to make it as, when it comes to stuff like this, I try to make it sound exactly like what it is. It's a mad scientist. It's a bunch of mad scientists engaging in a huge scientific experiment in our little blue fishbowl. Messing with the weather, spraying all sorts of crap into the sky, barium, aluminum, you know, God knows what else. Maybe they're releasing sorts of viruses. Who the hell knows what else they're spraying up there, okay? But just on the engineering weather manipulation levels alone, what they're doing is quite scary, because they could really alter the planet and terraform the planet and just cause some bad, very, very bad things. Anyway, I'm going to do more shows on geoengineering, but I want to get Pierre's take on geoengineering and chemtrails and spraying. So, Pierre, what's your take on geoengineering?
Well, first of all, I was always a big fan of airplanes. You know, growing up, I had the encyclopedias and books on different military planes and any type of aircraft and carrier and jets and what have you. And I remember looking up in the skies at the planes, and I'm a little older than you, so that's in the 70s, and seeing the contrails, behind the planes that would dissipate within, 10 seconds or so. That trail would just leave off, disappear. So it's something that I had never witnessed until one night I took a cruise, a Caribbean cruise, and that was quite recently, actually. That was for Christmas 2010, and there happened to be a lunar eclipse that night. And I got up at about 3 o'clock in the morning, and I went out on the balcony, and I saw the moon, which was all red. It was a beautiful lunar eclipse out in the Caribbean. It doesn't get better than that. But I noticed something else in the sky, and it was 3 o'clock in the morning, and I didn't know what it was, and I still don't know to this day. I did a little bit of research, and I Googled it, and I couldn't find anything on it, so I don't know if any of your listeners would have an idea of what it was that I saw, but it was like a chemtrail. It was up in the sky, but it was completely pitch black. The sky was black enough as it is because you're in the middle of the ocean, and there's thousands of stars, and the moon is red, but there was a streak going across the sky that was hiding the stars. It was clearly a pitch black streak. It was darker than black. It was just so weird looking. And it was very odd. It was the first time that I noticed something like that. I had no idea what it was, so I started looking into it. And on January 1st of that year, because that was December 2010, so January 1st, 2011, I'm back here in Jupiter, Florida, and I find some stuff about chemtrails, and I'm reading about it on the internet, and I get up to go to work, and I tell you, this felt like the Twilight Zone. I opened the front door to my house, and there they are, up in the sky. There's a dozen chemtrails right up in the Jupiter sky. And it's daytime now. You can see the white smoke, and they're streaking across the sky. And so right away, of course, I took out the camera, and I started filming. And it was just the oddest thing, you could ever imagine. And since that time, of course, I became very hooked about that phenomenon and really filming it and reading about it. And it's very odd. And another time that it was as obvious that something was going on, that they were doing some experimentation up there in the sky, was when I was in Memphis, Tennessee. I actually went to Graceland. And while I was at Graceland, up in the sky, there were, again, dozens and dozens of trails. And you could actually see the planes laying the trail down. And it wasn't commercial jetliners. There's not a chance that it was. And everybody around me was, looking at their iPhone. They were, they weren't paying attention. Nobody was looking up at the sky. And I just couldn't believe it, that people were not paying attention, were not aware of what was going on up above, their head. So that really got me thinking, and then as I keep doing my research, I ended up filming the Georgia Guidestones in Georgia, and you've probably heard of them. There's different things written in different languages, and the first thing that is written in English that you can understand, because it's English, it says that the population shall be kept at 500 million people. And so that scares a lot of people away. And the Georgia Guidestone is a whole mystery on and of itself. And but I'm thinking, and so I came up with my own little theory here with all that, with the Georgia Guidestone. They were erected on March 22nd, 1980. That's when they first went up. March 22nd, which is 3/22, right? 322 is a very symbolic number for like skulls and bones.
I was going to say it's the order. Yeah, the order of skull and bones.
And the month of March is the only month that's been named after a planet Mars. And the 22nd is really the first full day of spring, which is the rebirth. And I'm thinking, if you look at George W. Bush, there's some stories out there on him on the internet that are really fascinating. Apparently he's obsessed with Mars. He's obsessed with, not only having this manned mission out there, but to actually have people living there, for us to eventually move to Mars and migrate there. And so I'm thinking what may be happening here with all the chemtrails is that it could be an experiment. It could be, they're working out the kinks of terraforming. That's the term that is used, terraforming Mars. Not only are they, maybe trying to mess with the weather and trying to, protect us from the sun or whatever it is that they're thinking that they're doing, but I think the bigger plan is eventually terraforming Mars, creating an oxygen around the planet Mars, and having no more than 500 million people on Mars eventually. That the Georgia Guidestone may very well be like the 10 Commandments of a new world, and then you're thinking of the New World Order and what have you. Obviously, it's a very long-term project, but in a way, I think, why not? George W. Bush is definitely the kind of guy that I think would want to go down in history as being a god, being someone that helped create a new world, being an architect, for a new world. So I'm thinking there's maybe bigger plans than what most of us may think when it comes to chemtrail. I mean, there's no doubt in my mind that chemtrails exist, that it's out there. You can see them with your own eyes if you just start looking up. But it's a little spooky when you see these connections with the Georgia Guidestone and what George W. Bush is doing in retirement, and the fact that, yeah, indeed, we are going to have a manned mission to Mars, within our lifetime, and we're screwing up this planet. And I think there's a chance that a couple of 100 years in the future, Mars may be the planet for the elite, the planet for the few, the rich, the powerful, and the rest of us will be living down here. I mean, what better world, than the one that you created yourself, that imagine the laws out there. I mean, a government that runs this planet that they created. Wow. The whole spying scandal that we see today, it's nothing compared to what it would be like living on a world like that was created, for to have people living there, like 500 million of them. I don't know, it's kind of ugly, but it sounds like science fiction. It sounds far-fetched, but
it's kind of like the story of Total Recall. It's like Total Recall. That's what they were doing in the movie. They were terraforming the planet. Let me ask you this: do you talk to anybody you know about this? Do you not even so much the terraforming part? Do you even get them to? Are you able to get them to look up and even acknowledge that there's something odd going on? Because I remember when you and I were kids that the skies didn't look like that. This spring didn't start until the 90s. I can remember a sky where contrails would actually disappear within 30 seconds to a minute after the plane went by. You'd see them dissipate, and it was kind of fascinating to you. Wow, what is that? It shows up and then disappears. What is that? Is that like rocket exhaust? Is that like a space shuttle? Kids would think when we were kids, wow, that's so cool, Buck Rogers, right? But then you started seeing them get stuck in the air like spider webs. And I remember even back in the 90s saying to my mother, doesn't that look odd to you? Like, it just, and not having any reference to work from, Just doesn't that look odd to you? But that's it. There was never anywhere else to go. And then as I got older, I started to find out that there were other people that were looking up going, that looks odd. Now there's a whole generation of kids that they don't even know what it's like to not see the sky without spraying. And I've noticed they're going back in a lot of old films now, and even some old TV shows, anything that's like digitally remastered or digitally redone, they're going back in and they're adding chemtrails in it. I just watched, and I have to go, I think I have it on DVD somewhere, so I'm going to have to go check it on DVD, but I watched Christmas Vacation with Chevy Chase the other day, and my wife and I were watching it, and there was a scene where there's chemtrails in the sky in the movie, and I paused it, and I said, "Do you see that?" And now we weren't watching on DVD, we were watching on a digital download, like in video streaming from Netflix. So I know that could have been digitally remastered. Now I have to go back in and check my DVD and see if that was, because they were doing some spraying back in the 90s, and the shot was probably done, back then they actually did do real movie shoots outside. They didn't, green screen everything and, do everything all digital effects. So it might have been just that they were shooting outside and they were spraying on that particular day. It could be. That happens once in a while. But I've noticed more and more when you watch even the newer TV shows now, they're just blatant. There's X's and crisscrosses in the sky, and they're like, oh, that's normal. And if somebody references it in a TV show and they point up to it, that character is made out to be, a drunk, crazy, nutbag, conspiracy theorist, idiot retard, and there's no way that he's got any sort of credibility whatsoever. So, like, in your personal life, can you get people to, like, even acknowledge, like, by pointing up and go, look, that is not normal. Can you get them to acknowledge that or no?
No. They have had people look up and have explained to them the difference between contrails and chemtrails, but they're always convinced that it's just contrails, that there's no way that the government would do anything like that. They're just, they haven't done any research. It's just like the same people would say, yeah, Lee was a lone nut. He did it all by himself. It's like people have these strong opinions, yet they haven't done any research at all. And it just amazes me. And because I'm always open-minded. I want to hear what research they've done. Talk to me about what have you done to look into this? And they haven't. They just are adamant that there's no such things as chemtrails. It's fascinating. But, the number one cable show, Pawn Stars, right? I think it's the number one cable show or something. But you can see chemtrails on Pawn Stars every week. It's part of their promotional shot where you see the guys and the name of the pawn shop and what have you. And you see the chemtrails right above the pawn shop. So, yeah, we're totally conditioned to see them as part of reality, a normal part of life. And so, yeah, I'm not surprised that they would be digitally adding them to old movies. It's very sad, the far reaches that, perhaps, again, the CIA is behind this, that it has, on controlling, the public.
Yeah, I've had this discussion myself with people about, looking up, and I point up to them and they don't want to see it either. And it's usually the same argument. The government wouldn't do that. And I just say, hey, look, this is historical fact. You can go research this. More than 50% of the guys that were involved in testing the first atomic weapon on American soil, okay, and it wasn't the first atomic weapon that was fired on the planet. That would, at least by human hands, that would have to go to the Nazis. They did it before we did. But the first test here on American soil, okay, a lot of the scientists didn't know that the Nazis had already done it. That was a big secret, okay? And they thought they were the first ones doing it, and they were convinced, more than 50% of them, Pierre, were convinced that they were going to ignite the entire atmosphere of the planet on fire. Some of them thought they were going to crack the earth in half. I mean, they were convinced that in one way, shape, or form that they were going to end all life on the planet Earth. At least 50% of them, if not more. And you know what? They went ahead and they did it anyway. So that ought to tell you that they don't care. I mean, they don't care. They, because people say, oh, well, they have to live on the planet too. guess what? It doesn't make any sense to me either. Okay? Does not make sense to any rational thinking human being. These people think otherwise. And believe me, they really don't want to who knows what sick psychopathic, thoughts they have in their heads, but any rational individual wouldn't want to contaminate the planet too much, because you can only live in a bunker for so long. You can't live in a bunker for 200-300 years. Okay, and some of the things they're doing could contaminate the planet for a much longer period of time than that, like Fukushima. Let's not pay any attention to Fukushima. Let's keep focusing all of our money on blowing things up. Let's not put any money into stopping that thing. Although that's a bit too late. Wait, what do you think about Fukushima? We got about 8 minutes. What do you think about Fukushima? What are your thoughts on that?
Well, yeah, it's very scary. It's obviously not something that is covered in the media appropriately, and it's just very scary what's going to happen, the long-term ramification, and the people living on the West Coast. I used to live on the West Coast. Right now, I'd be terrified out of my mind, eating any sea life that came from the ocean in that area. I would think it's probably not safe. It's very scary stuff, but we just seem to have this innate ability to look away at the inconvenient truth, something that we don't want to see, like 9/11, Building 7 is such a strong evidence that, it was an inside job, or the fact that there's no plane ever seen, hitting the Pentagon, and a little hole in the Pentagon, and but people don't want to look and question. They'd rather say, no, let me believe in the government. They wouldn't hurt us. They wouldn't do this to us. And so people look away. They just look where they're told to look. So they pay attention to Justin Bieber and all the other crazy entertainers out there, and they don't pay attention to what's happening to our world. That's just it's sad. So that's why I'm so thankful for you and the show that you're doing, because you're really doing something that's one of the most informative shows out there, and you're not a sellout. You're not doing this because General Motors doesn't want you to talk about this or that. You're doing it. You're doing the straight talk about the straight stuff. It's good.
Well, thank you, Pierre. I don't get paid for doing this, so I don't have any corporate sponsors. I do everything. I run everything out of my own pocket, so it sucks because it doesn't suck because I shouldn't say it sucks because I don't want a corporate sponsor. It sucks not to have some sort of funding to be able to have a bigger operation and maybe hire one or two people to help out so I could do bigger projects. But at the same time, I do everything myself, makes me a jack of all trades. And, I'm not in this for the money. I'm just in this to enlighten people and make the world a better place, because I want the world to be less crazy. I want things to go, back to I shouldn't say back, maybe get onto a smoother path. I don't want to go back to anything. I don't want to, regress. I want to evolve, but I don't want to leave this planet. In the future, I don't want to be like 80, 90 years old and be looking at things and just be like, man, I should have done much better. I could have done more. Or, if things go really bad, who knows, none of us might live to be 80 or 90 years old because none of us did anything. So I don't want to, I have a niece. I have a little niece. I have nephews. I don't want to leave them a screwed up world. I don't want to leave them a screwed up planet. I want to be able to leave them a planet that they have a brighter future than what I was handed. You know what I mean? We weren't given. Everybody always thinks, oh, what are you talking about? You guys had a great future. No. If you think about what we're going through now, no, we really didn't, because this is our future then is our reality now, and it's not so bright, right? But people like you, people like Judyth, like Hy McEnery, and all the other great researchers and writers and bloggers and radio show hosts and everybody out there, all the people doing the good thing, fighting the good fight and doing this for the right reasons, they are the people that are turning the tide. The listeners tuning in are the ones, everybody. We're all in this. Once you wake up and you see this, just having the conversation with somebody else, engaging them in that conversation and having that talk about any of these topics, that is changing the entire dynamic, because we don't even have conversations in this country anymore. We just don't. There aren't conversations amongst families. There aren't conversations amongst husbands and wives. There aren't conversations amongst coworkers or friends or neighbors anymore. People are afraid to talk to each other. They're afraid to tell their neighbor that, I don't trust the government because they might tell the government, and I don't want to get my door kicked in at 3 o'clock in the morning. Well, guess what? Psst! The terrorists have won. And I don't mean the ones with the turbans in the cave, when the Hollywood cameras are on. I mean the real terrorists with the $15,000 Armani suits on Wall Street. They've won. Because now we're looking over our shoulders, we don't trust anybody anymore, and we can't have a conversation with anybody anymore. They've broken down communication. The only thing we have left is Twitter, which is 140 characters. Good luck having an intelligent conversation in 140 characters. Okay? And that's what they want. They block everything on Facebook. You got to pay $1 bazillion now. They're stopping the conversation. They do not want the cells of the body, all of us, to communicate with one another. Because if the cells have better communication, then we can fight cancer off, which would be them, right? They don't want that. They want to take... they're like a tumor, Pierre. Do they not realize that if they continue this, they're just going to, eventually kill the host and then kill themselves in the process?
Absolutely, yeah, you're right. Speaking of technology, you're right. I think a lot of research has been spent looking at, the smartphones and how it could affect society in general. But there's an interesting point about camera phones. In Japan in 2001, camera phones were available all over the place. But camera phones only became available here in the United States a few months after 9/11. Now, think about what 9/11 would look like if the majority of the population had a cell phone with them with a camera, where they could videotape the event. We didn't have that ability. It took a few months after the event, and it makes me wonder if that technology was delayed here in the United States until after 9/11. That's another question that I think there's nothing wrong in asking questions.
That's actually a good point, and we only got about a minute and a half left, but that's actually a really good point, and I'll tell you why really quick. Because I've said this before, and I'll say it again. Cell phones did not become popular like they did now until after 9/11. It was after 9/11 and the stories of the calls from the airplanes at 30,000 feet that were technically impossible, especially back then with analog phones.
Right.
Okay, but I digress.
Right.
That's a whole show in and of itself. But these phone calls that were supposedly made from the cell phones, all of a sudden everybody got there. They wanted to buy cell phones for their families, and all of a sudden all these cell phone companies suddenly had this national tragedy. They had the wherewithal to sit down and come up with all these different plans and family plans and all these different rates, and it's like almost like you guys had this stuff sitting in a drawer somewhere already. It just. It's and I've pointed this out, and people are like, I'm like, go back and think about it. When did people start carrying cell phones, and when did kids have cell phones? Well, we didn't have cell phones. Cell phones were a luxury before 9/11. After 9/11, it was, oh my God, something bad could happen to my kids. I need to get in touch with them anytime, any day. I remember that push. That was how they sold cell phones. So that's a good point, Pierre, about the camera phones as well. It just makes you wonder: did they not release it? Did they wait? Until afterwards for a reason? Were there multiple reasons? Marketing and manipulation, whatever. Oh, God, it's just the rabbit hole goes deep when you start to really dig. Anyway, we're out of time, brother. Thank you so much for coming on.
Thank you, Papa. You're the best. Keep it up.
Thank you, brother. I appreciate it, Pierre. Ladies and gentlemen, we are out of time tonight. Do not let that stop you from researching. Go to the archives. Download all of my shows from federaljack.com going back 3 years. Go to the other sections in the downloadable archive, the JFK section, the war section. Do your research. As always, the solutions to our problems are an inside job. I love you all. We're out of here.